All right, so welcome everybody. If someone would just leave me something in the chat to confirm that you can hear me okay. Okay, great. Thank you, Carrie. All right, so we are gathered together to practice Yin Yoga today. This week we're doing very straightforward, no frills Yin. This is a spine series. It's funny, last week we did something a little more experimental. There are a lot of people here. Maybe I scared everyone away, but the irony is that usually after we do something like that, we do something just very straight ahead. So it's funny when people get scared off by something. A lot of times they're missing out on maybe what they had expected last week they would have gotten this week. So regardless, we're here to practice Yin Yoga, and we're going to start with butterfly pose. Feel free to put on any music you like in the background. Just make sure you can still hear me. This is a rather straightforward and simple pose, but ironically, many people still do it wrong. The minute I say join your feet together, everyone tries to do this. Okay, this is a different posture that is more or less a stretch for this muscle here. These are called your adductors, also known as the groin. So we're not interested in stretching the groin today because it is the spine series. This is a spine stretch. If I bring my feet out and I fold forward, it creates a stretch along the back of my spine. So push your feet out and come forward and down. Exactly where your feet should be is up to you. Another mistake is grabbing your feet and yanking or pulling yourself down. Instead, just relax, let gravity do the work for you. If it's a little too intense, try putting a block under your forehead, forearms, or knees. If it's not intense enough, try sitting on a block, blanket, or bolster. And if that doesn't do the trick, leave me a comment in the chat and I will take a look or listen to what's going on with you and try and make a suggestion of how you can get the intensity you're looking for. Having said that, this does not tend to be an intense stretch for anybody. We don't want it to be intense. We don't want to intensely stretch the back of our spine. It's just not really a great idea. Instead, we want to gently stretch the back of our spine. And that's exactly what we're trying to do. We'll be here for about another 4 minutes. Just relax and let gravity lengthen and stretch the back side of your spine. All right, so coming on up, we now take the legs straight. What this does is it takes up the slack in this muscle, which is called the hamstrings. The hamstrings attach at the knee and also at the pelvis, and this allows or doesn't allow the pelvis to tilt forward quite as easily. So as I come forward and down, my back tends to round more, which gives me, again, more stretch, which is what we're going for. And again, you might think more is always better. It isn't. So we want just a little bit more. Of course, if I do this, I can get a lot of stretch, but I will probably injure my back. Not today, and that's the important thing to understand about yoga. Both the benefits of yoga and yoga injuries are generally created over a long period of time. And I'm talking about the big stuff. So yeah, you might tweak something in a class. Of course, there are little injuries that we can have. I'm talking about the big injuries that are permanent. Those are created by doing something wrong over a long period of time, not usually one class. Maybe it was one class where you noticed, you felt it for the first time, but you had probably been doing something wrong for a very long time, and then that class broke the camel's back. Of course, I am generalizing, okay? So, of course, there are people that maybe the first time they try something, they injure or hurt themselves. But this is rare. Whenever I'm talking like this, whenever a teacher is talking and they say something, if you do this, you're going to hurt yourself. They, of course, are generalizing. Not everyone's going to hurt themselves. Not everyone is going to have whatever effect it is. Okay? So, it's true of both the benefits and the injuries in yoga. We want to create good habits, and we want to practice them consistently, persistently, over a long period of time. Then we can begin to reap the fruits of yoga practice. If I practice once a week, every couple of weeks, I'm not going to see much effect. Sure, again, I might feel a little better. I might notice a difference. But this will be much less pronounced than if I practice consistently and persistently over a long period of time. Same is true of the injuries. Sure, you can do this today and you will probably not injure yourself. You can probably do it for several weeks, maybe even several months, and possibly even years without noticing that you are damaging your spine. But it's likely if you keep doing that, one day you will have a pain in your back and it will seem to have come out of nowhere, because it may not happen while you're doing this. Maybe you'll just get out of bed one day, or you'll try picking up a box, and all of a sudden there'll be a shooting pain in your back. And you won't realize that it came from doing this stretch. Now, doing this in Vinyasa yoga for 30 seconds is fine, but it's because we hold the postures longer in Yin that we need to approach things in a different way. All right, so now we're going to take a little break. It's called a rebound. Come up and back, and then we make our way back into this position, which we call pentacle pose. Your arms could really be in any position that is comfortable and relaxing, so don't feel like you need them by your sides. Same with the legs, they could be closer together or wider apart. Most people are more comfortable with legs wider and arms wider, and that's why we call this pentacle. Pentacle is a 5-pointed star, so the human body creates this shape very naturally. Now, before we go on, we want to counter stretch. And to do this, we use what's called the leg cradle. Bringing the legs in, we give them a little squeeze and maybe make a few circles in each direction. Really, any movement that helps bring a sense of relief and balance to your body is more than welcome here. Okay? And then, before we continue, we will hinge, which helps to stabilize the hips and spine. To do the hinge, your hands go under your hips with the palms down. Extend your legs straight up toward the ceiling, unless there's pain in your back, and then you bend your knees. Lifting the head and neck, you take a deep breath, and as you exhale, gradually lower the legs toward the ground. Take a nice deep breath, and with the next exhale, relax again onto your back in preparation for the next pose. Our next pose is banana. To do banana, shift your hips over to the right edge of your mat. Take the left leg and move it to the left. How far exactly depends on what feels right in your body. Cross the right ankle over the left ankle while leaving the right hip on the ground. So we don't want to roll over, keeping that hip near the ground. It does not need to touch, but it needs to be near the ground. Extending arms overhead, we reach up and grab the right wrist with the left hand. And I pull myself over in the attempt to stretch here, what are called the obliques. So if I feel the stretch here, I stay here. If I do not, I can wiggle or move myself over until I begin to feel the stretch. Again, my right shoulder and hip are relatively close to the ground. They do not need to be touching the ground, but they need to be near the ground. This is called lateral flexion, and it is one of 6 ways our spine moves. In today's class, you can think of today's class as a workout for the spine. In order to exercise the spine, we simply want to move it through all its different articulations. The first set brought the spine into what's called flexion. This is lateral flexion to the left. In a moment, well, honestly, in 4 minutes, we'll be doing lateral flexion to the right. Then we'll do what's called extension, which is back bending. And we'll finish with rotation, which is spinal twisting. Even though these can be combined in various ways, really at its most basic, these are the 6 things that the spine can do. It really doesn't do much more than that. By doing this on a regular basis, we help keep the spine healthy, flexible, and strong. Our bodies very much work on a use it or lose it principle. Not only that, by taking the body slightly outside of what is comfortable and easy for it, you can actually make it healthier and younger. By always doing what is comfortable and easy for your body, the body is less healthy and tends to age more quickly. The key is just taking yourself slightly outside of what is easy or comfortable. If you go too far, you can actually damage and speed up the aging process. So it's really a sweet spot. And this is why in yoga, this sweet spot is called your edge. Sometimes it can be a very thin, narrow region in which we get those specific advantages or benefits. If we go a little bit in one direction, we're not doing enough. And if we go a little bit in the other direction, we're doing too much. Some poses have a big, wide edge. There's a lot of area where we can benefit. But some poses have a very narrow edge where we must really be paying attention. And it's almost like walking a tightrope. And when you're walking on a tightrope, it's easy to go too far to the left or too far to the right, and then you fall. Unfortunately for us, our minds very often work in a binary this or that way. So some people practice yoga always pushing too hard. Other people practice always being afraid to push and never pushing enough. We would like to push, but just the right amount. This requires awareness. Another word for awareness is presence. We must show up mentally on our mat to get the most out of our yoga practice. Let's switch sides. Moving our hips to the left side of the mat, we take the right leg to the right. Crossing the left ankle over the right, I reach up and grab my left wrist with my right hand. That may be enough already. But if it's not, I can again scoot or wiggle my head and shoulders over to the right side until I feel a stretch. Now I just wait. Once I feel the stretch, I assume that I am at my edge. Maybe I could go further. Maybe I could back out a little bit and still feel the stretch. Those would also likely still be within the range of what we call your edge. Your edge is not necessarily as far as you can possibly go, but sometimes it is. 3 more minutes. Less than a minute. All right, let's unwind. And again, we will rebound. Just taking a little bit of time to feel the spine and the back. Then again, before we continue, let's hug our legs in and bring in a little bit of movement. Again, the goal in moving here is to bring some relief and some contrast to being still for so long. As beneficial as stillness is, it can be hard on the body. It can also be beneficial for the body. Same with movement. Movement can be very beneficial. It can also be hard. So it's, again, not one or the other. It really is both and. So this is the movement portion. Now let's hinge up. Same as before, except this time we use the weight of the legs to pull us up to a seat. Once you're upright, move into tabletop and do a little bit of what we call the marauding bear. Moving the hips and spine around, stretch everything out. Again, bring movement to those areas that maybe have not been getting enough movement, bringing in blood flow. When you're done with that, you can tuck your toes and give everything a good stretch in your legs. Once you're done with that, come forward and down onto your belly and prop yourself up on the elbows. That is called Sphinx. And that is our next set or posture in the next set. First posture in our next set. Okay, so Sphinx is done on the elbows like so. And the intention is to gently compress our back. So you should feel it back here, just a little bit of compression. If you don't feel it, you can straighten your arms, and that's called seal. Same idea though, I'm just trying to compress my back very gently. I can do either pose with the legs together or apart, with my shoulders depressed or relaxed, with my head held up, dropped forward, or dropped back. Each option will change the posture to some degree. Okay, it might make it better, it might make it worse. It depends on you. This I call the lazy man's or lazy woman's seal pose. Propping yourself up on the elbows is much the same as straightening your arms, except maybe you can say it's a little less work. It's a little easier. Same idea though, I'm still trying to compress my back. Gently. Again, too much, and I can definitely hurt my back, injure my back by doing this. Too little, and I'm wasting my time. I'm not getting any benefit. I might as well be sitting on the couch watching television instead. All forms of exercise, whether it's mental exercise, emotional exercise, physical exercise, or spiritual exercise, needs to take us out of our normal condition, what we might call our comfort zone. If it does not do that, it is not really exercise. It's something else. It might be entertainment. It might be fun. It might be a game. And there's nothing wrong with any of those things. But for something to be a practice, it must take us outside of our comfort zone. What we know, what we can do, what is easy, what we are used to. That's where we learn, and that's where we grow. A very good example of this is music. I think many people have studied music, at least when they were children. The right way to practice music is to do something you don't already know how to do. If you're playing a piece that you know how to do, that's called performance. That's called playing music. Practice is when you're doing something you cannot yet do. Now, there's many ways to practice. You can take something you already know how to do, take a metronome, and speed up that metronome until you begin to not be able to do it anymore. That is one way to practice. You can take something that you do not yet know how to do and try and slow it down to the point where you can begin to play it. And then again, gradually begin to speed it up until it begins to fall apart. Again, that is practice. You can take a piece of music that you don't know and try and learn it. That is practice. But sitting down at the piano and playing a piece that you played a million times before perfectly is not practice. It is the same with yoga. Even though you may be able to do this posture every single time, the question is, are you taking yourself to an edge where you're feeling the pose? Now, there are exceptions to everything that I say, and so we must be careful. Some people who are very, very flexible have certain joints that are what we might call hypermobile. They might find that when they get to the point where they are feeling the posture, they might actually be at an unsafe position, maybe not even for that part of their body, maybe for another part of their body, right? And so again, we must be aware first. We must really be present on our mat, aware, awake. We should not be blindly, dogmatically following any teacher's instructions, whether that be me or someone else. We must always try and listen deeper than just the words. try and understand what the teacher is trying to communicate and understand when that may not actually apply. It doesn't matter what we're talking about. This is why dogma really isn't that helpful, because there will always be exceptions to anything you can say. Do not kill, do not steal, do not whatever, 10 commandments. There will always be exceptions to those things. If you ever study philosophy, you learn this very quickly, that there will always be scenarios and situations where we can say, well, that doesn't really apply in that situation. If I apply that dogmatic rule, it actually puts me in a situation where I am not comfortable morally or ethically with the outcome. All right, let's go ahead and come on down, and we'll transition to our next pose. You just rest for a moment, and I will set up the props for this next posture. This next posture is both potentially our most therapeutic posture of the evening and also our most challenging posture. These two things are often found together. Where there is great challenge, there's often great reward. Where there's great risk, there's often great reward. The two usually go together. It's very rare in life that we find that there is a huge reward to be had by not taking any risk. Okay, sit up and bring yourself to sit either on your heels or between your heels. Now, I don't use any props when I do this posture, but I've set these up in case you need them, and I will demonstrate the use of the props very quickly. So if my ankles and feet are not flexible, or if my mat or the ground that I'm practicing on is just very rigid, I might have pain in my ankles or my feet. I can take a blanket and lay it out or roll it up as I've done to keep the ankles from needing to flex so much. If I don't need that, if I don't feel any pain in my feet, then I don't use it. And that's true of all the props. We're not using the props for the sake of using them. We only use them because we need them to stay safe or to keep us from being absolutely miserable in a posture. You can sit between your heels or on your heels, or you could sit on a block that's between the heels, especially if your knees hurt. That can be very helpful. The feet can point backward like so, or you can have the feet out to the sides like this. Not everybody can do this, but everyone should be able to do this, more or less. The knees can be together, but they can also be apart, quite wide apart. Again, knees wider is generally less strain on the knees. Now, I want to check and see if I feel a stretch in the front of my thighs. If I do, I want to stay right here because this is already a therapeutic and beneficial stretch. If I do not feel a stretch, I want to begin lowering back. I start with my hands, and then maybe I go to my elbows. Now you can see I've put some props behind me to demonstrate one use of the bolster, block, and blanket. I call this the yoga lazy boy, okay, or yoga recliner. Now, I only want to use this if it's necessary. And it might be necessary if you can't quite get back all the way. It might be very awkward to hold yourself up for 5 minutes. So this is one solution. However, if I do not feel a stretch here or feel anything on my back and I'm laying here very comfortable, again, I'm not really benefiting. I'm not out of that comfort zone. So one way to go further is to remove this block. Laying back, I check in, do I feel anything in my back or my thighs? Well, personally, I am beginning to feel it in my back a little bit. But I know through experience that I prefer to do this all the way on my back. So I will eventually get rid of that and come all the way back. Now, very often when students see this, somebody laying on their back like this in class, their mind immediately assumes that the point of doing this pose is to one day lay back flat on your back. And that if you don't do that, somehow you are still working your way up to one day laying on your back. I hope to once and for all completely put that out of your mind. The goal of the pose is to create therapeutic and beneficial stresses on the tissues in your body. This posture does that in a few ways. It can create beneficial stresses on the ankles, the knees, the front of the thighs, the SI joint, sacroiliac joint, and the lumbar spine. Today, we're really interested in the SI joint, which is very, very low down. You could say even below your spine. What's called the sacrum, where the pelvis meets the spine, you might say. This pose is an extremely beneficial and therapeutic thing to do for the SI joint, which is one of the casualties of the modern sedentary seated lifestyle. Contrary to what you might have been raised to believe, we modern people do not live a very healthy lifestyle, just the opposite. Many things that we do are bad for our health. They are very comfortable and easy to do, but they are actually bad for our health. Sitting in a chair is one of those things. If anything, when you're growing up, you would think sitting in a chair is the most important and most beneficial thing you can do, because the adults around you were probably screaming and yelling at you to sit down constantly. Now, I get it. If you're a parent and you tell your children to sit down, I get it. All right, I'm not saying you're a bad person for doing that. But the fact of the matter is human bodies were designed to move a lot. And children very naturally sense this. They want to move a lot. It's very inconvenient for parents and teachers because having children running and jumping and screaming all over the place is hard to manage. It's like chaos. So what do parents and teachers do? They say, sit down, be quiet. By the time we get into our 20s, probably, even maybe our late teens, a lot of us would rather sit than stand, walk, jump, or do any of those other things. This is very unfortunate for us. And then for many of us, once we're older than that, I'd say maybe from then on, our inclination to move or to do anything with our body tends to go down and down and down. When you get to be my age, which I'm in my later 40s now, you begin to experience pains and aches in your body. And if you're not careful, those pains and aches make you want to move even less. You just want to be like, I don't want to move at all, because every time I move, there's another pain, there's another ache. This is a mistake. All right, take your time and very gradually make your way out of this pose. There are 3 ways out: rolling to one side, pressing your way up, or like I did, just releasing the legs. Let's relax on our back for a moment. Feel the rebound. Okay, we'll bring our legs in, give them a little squeeze, shake it out. Again, this is called leg cradle. There's no one way to do it. You can experiment, find what works for you today. And don't assume that what works for you today will work tomorrow. You might have different things that you're feeling in your body. We'll finish with a simple spinal twist called twisted roots. To do the pose, cross your right knee over your left and drop the knees to the left. Feel free to experiment with your arm, leg, head, and neck position to find the position that gives you the best stretch. This pose tends to stretch muscles in the torso and that attach to the torso, so at the hips and the shoulder and chest region. Once again, once you're in it, just relax and allow gravity to do its thing. So as I was mentioning in the last posture, the sacrum or SI joint is one of the victims of the modern sedentary seated lifestyle. In general, there are many parts of the body that are the casualty of our modern lifestyle. The muscles in the legs tend to get very tight. The joints in the hips and the low back tend to get very weak and damaged. Our upper body tends to be very weak. And women especially begin to lose mass in the bones in their rib cage and upper spine as a result of this. It's called osteoporosis. This is why it's very unfortunate when women especially think that as women, they do not need to cultivate or build upper body strength. Sometimes when I teach vinyasa yoga and we're doing push-ups, women think again that, oh, well, I don't need to do the push-ups. That's for the guys. I can do girl push-ups. But again, this is a mistake. If anything, the women need the push-ups more than the men. And again, I'm speaking therapeutically. They stand to benefit more than the men do in the class, generally speaking, because they, generally speaking, are the ones who will lose that bone mass more so than the men. So there's a lot that we can learn that can improve our approach to health and aging. And as I've gone deeper down the rabbit hole of being a yoga teacher and studying things like biomechanics and psychology, the psychology of performance and sports psychology, and many other subjects as well, there are certain themes that arise and come back and keep showing up in different disciplines. And these are the things that I tend to take notice of and try and share with students. And again, these are things that are often counterintuitive, and they can also be things that we might not like hearing. I would love to hear that I can become spiritually whole, physically healthy, emotionally happy, and mentally clear by eating ice cream 3 times a day. I would love that. I love ice cream. Ice cream's delicious. It's one of my favorite foods. Do I actually believe that that's true? No. And again, we often teach our children this, don't we? They might say, I don't want to go to school. I don't want to eat my vegetables. I don't want to do this. But we will often tell them that it's for their own good that we are forcing them to do those very things. And yet as adults, we often think, maybe because we're adults, we think that we know what's good for us and what isn't. But in my experience, most people don't actually know what is good for them. They know what they like, but they don't actually know what would be good for them. Many of the choices that we modern people make, again, are actually bad for us. All right, let's switch sides. So on this side, left knee over right. And then we take the knees down to the right side. This is our last posture. Another area that this shows up is in the field of what we might call the study of happiness. So there's a woman with a very interesting podcast. Her name is Dr. Laurie Santos. And I think the podcast is called the Happiness Podcast. And I believe she's at Stanford University. And she studies the science of happiness. What actually leads people to be happy? And she says right at the beginning of the podcast, what if our minds, which constantly tell us what we need to do to be happy, right? Doesn't your mind tell you that? You wake up in the morning, it says, go get a cup of coffee. That's going to make you happy. Go this way to work. Avoid traffic. That's going to make you happy. Don't talk to this person. They're unpleasant. That's going to make you happy. So I'll have that. But she says right at the beginning of her podcast, what if our minds are lying to us? What if we can't actually believe what our mind says? What if by actually going against what our mind tells us will make us happy? What if that's actually what makes us happy? And then throughout her podcast, she gives plenty of examples of scientific evidence that shows us that going against what we think will make us happy is actually the thing that in reality does make us happy. Interestingly, in the yoga tradition, this was understood many thousands of years ago. In the Bhagavad Gita, which is a seminal cornerstone text of the yoga tradition, it says that real yoga tastes bitter at first, and then later it tastes sweet like nectar. And this goes back to what I was saying right at the beginning of class. The real fruit of yoga comes from consistent and persistent practice. At the beginning, we might not even like what we're doing. We might actually feel worse while we're doing it and possibly even after. But if we are consistent and persistent, over time, we realize that, wow, this is really changing things on a fundamental level. The Gita also says that things that are not good for us very often taste sweet at first, and it's only later that we realize that they are bitter. Can you think of some examples? I can. What about that first beer? If you like to drink. Really sweet, right? Then we might think, well, that was good. Let me have another one. We have another one. That was really good. Now we're starting to get tipsy or drunk. Now our judgment is getting poor. We might think another one's a good idea. We have another one. Well, again, if you're my age, after a few beers, you might wake up the next day feeling really bad. Now, I'm using beer as an example because it might be more familiar to most people. But you could substitute heroin or any other kind of narcotic in there. Might feel really good going down, might feel really good the first time. But if we follow that, we say, well, that was good, I want more, we find that we're going down and down and down and down. It takes more and more of the substance to have the same effect, and it's destroying our health, along with probably our relationships and our work ethic and other things. So let's go ahead and come on out of this. The main takeaway, and this is the takeaway for many of my classes, because I find that I try and motivate students through education, through the intellect, through understanding. Other ways of motivating people might be yelling at them, screaming at them, telling them they should do it, telling them that they're bad if they don't, using guilt and shame and blame. I'm just not interested in those things. Instead, I would rather tell you what I've learned. Again, most of it's based on scientific evidence, but as I said, the yogis figured this stuff out a long time ago, and they wrote about it. It's there, all the evidence is there. Of course, it's couched in a certain kind of cultural language that if you aren't willing to look past that or take the time to understand it, that. But if you study I do, you begin to see that the approach of the yogis was very scientific in its own way. It wasn't science, they weren't using a scientific method, but it was very much in the same spirit as the best science. They were asking questions about the nature of reality, and then they were doing their own form of experimentation. They were experimenting with the inside of the human, not the outside. We can't observe what is going on inside the human heart or the human mind. We can't observe thoughts. Maybe one day we will be able to, and then we can study scientifically this stuff. But right now, the only science we have is showing the results of these practices, their effects on our health. And so far, the proof is coming out every day how good yoga, meditation are for your health. Now again, if I don't push myself at all, if I stay within my comfort zone, I might still get some benefit, but it's going to be less than I could have gotten. All right, everyone. So thank you so much for joining today. I'm going to let you relax for a few minutes in Shavasana, and I'll guide you through just a little bit of a body scan relaxation. So lay down, make yourself very comfortable. If you can, dim the lights and turn off any music. Close your eyes. Take a nice deep breath in and let it all go with the next exhale. And then again, take a full breath in and exhale and let it all out. Now just let your breath be completely natural. I'd like you to imagine that your entire body is the color blue, from head to toe, completely blue. And notice how that feels. Now, imagine, starting with your toes, your body is beginning to change color to red. First the toes and feet, then the ankles, legs, knees and thighs, the buttocks, pelvis, abdomen, back, the chest, shoulders, arms, elbows, wrists, hands and fingers, and the neck and the head all turn red. Notice how that feels. Feel the body relax. All right, everyone, I recommend you continue relaxing for the next few minutes. Thank you again for joining me today. Please reach out if there's any way I can help support you. Let me know if there are any questions. Otherwise, I hope to see you next week on Wednesday. I'll be back at 4:45 with a Vinyasa flow class and at 6 o'clock for Yin. Namaste. Thank you, Carrie. I'll see you next week.